YouTube channel. I'm here with my friend Sam. So we're just gonna. How you been, mate? It must be a bit of a nightmare comedy stuff when you
Yeah,
can't do comedy live.
it's certainly been a tough one. Yes, the online gig thing didn't suit me particularly well. I've done a few, and they were okay, some better than others. But obviously, with no live performance, I've got itchy feet, as it were.
Online shows are weird. I mean, I can only imagine how hard it must be for comedy because you haven't got anything to bounce off at all. I mean, I've done gigs where I've sort of died, but at least then you've got something to fight against. But with the
Yeah,
online show, it's like nothing. There's no bounce at all, is there? So,
there really isn't.
and you can't do the thing where you sort of focus on one member of the audience and try and win them over. You can't. It's completely different experience, isn't it?
It really is. I did a show for the online streaming service Next Up because they host one of my comedy specials. So I did one of theirs because they asked, and that was ever so slightly better because I'd kind of prepared bits and pieces of material, and they've actually got a bit of a built-in audience. And I was doing stuff. I do this stupid stuff with puppets. So I've got this puppet, and I do this whole setup where I say, "Oh, I've got a roommate who I'm living with, and I hate him. He's the worst." And then the whole second half is me being him as a puppet, talking about how much he doesn't like me. So that kind of worked a little bit more in the online thing because you can just pull a puppet out and it's kind of silly and people are kind of into it. But like so much of those online shows is people still trying to do their stand-up material, and it's just a completely different beast. It just doesn't really work.
It's
I found
bizarre.
like panel show style stuff kind of works. A friend of mine runs a very good panel show, and I did that, and that was kind of a uh mock the week style thing, and that actually worked quite well because it was much more improvised and it felt like people actually talking to each other. But yeah, a lot of the online gigs have been very, very poo.
Yeah, it's a very different. I mean, like I said, I did loads of them about a few years back, and we did one called the Prog from Home gig, which was like Mike Portnoy from Dream
From Dream
Theater,
Theater.
yeah, headlined it. So there was
Wow.
6,500 people watching, and we hadn't realised the scale of it at all. We thought it'd just be just be. I thought like 15, 20 people watching,
Yeah.
and so we were just sitting here, literally, in here with no preparation whatsoever. The next guy who came on after us had a drone above him and had
Yeah.
blew over his house as he started his set. Didn't have the guns for it. We hadn't,
Yeah.
and I think it was like 20 or 30 acts, lots of acts, and every sort of act was up in the game. So
Yeah.
we were ill prepared. It was just, but it's weird, isn't it? Because no one's sort of really, there's no context for this, is there? There's no,
No.
never done this before. So, there's no, it's like, I mean, how many gigs do you normally do a week, Sam?
Well, I was a proper full-time comedian, so I was doing usually 5 or 6 a week. So I was really not home very much at all, and to all of a sudden go from being out 5 or 6 days a week to being home 24/7. It was a real adjustment in those first couple of weeks. It was kind of pretty tough.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, it must be a very difficult thing to do. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're so used to, like I say, the game of playing off an audience. I mean, I went through a stage of doing a lot of solo shows, but only never anything like that. I mean, I'm probably doing sort of 40, 50 a year, very briefly. And you get so comfortable in front of an audience that to not have that there is so weird and so.
Oh yeah, definitely. And
So,
I'm almost the opposite of most other touring professional comedians I know who are actually very anti-people, strangely. They're not very sociable people, most of them. But I like genuinely thrive on kind of meeting new people and getting that nice energy play off of people when when you meet someone new and they're excited and you've shown them something fun and then you can hang out and drink and go to parties and stuff. I really dig all that stuff. So
yeah,
to
me
have
too,
all that
man.
sort of taken away was a little bit difficult for me. But as I said, you adopt, adapt, and improve, don't you? So
I mean, I'm sure when there's stuff you're coming up with now and lots of new concepts and things you'll use when things do. I mean, how long do you think it'll be before things return?
well, there's been talk of indoor shows from August, but I haven't heard anything from bookers yet as to who's booking what and where. Because the biggest problem with the comedy club is that quite usually they're quite small rooms and they cram 50 chairs into it. And because the ticket price is relatively lower, they have to fill those 50 chairs to make the money on the night. So the problem is going to be, you're going to have these 50 to 100 seater venues who only just break even if they sell, 80% of their tickets, who are now going to have to do these social distancing gigs where they can only sell half the number of tickets. And you kind of think they're either going to have half the number of staff every day or pay the acts less, or, there's going to be a real juggling act going on, getting everybody back to work, I think.
And do you think so? I was talking to one of the guys who does he's quite involved in the London scene the other day, and he said that basically, one of the things you can have is there's going to be massive, even if you can put the ticket prices up and have 20-25% of the audience, you're still going to have a massive downfall on the beer and the alcohol sales.
You totally do, yeah. And the other thing about comedy is you kind of want people together and and tight together, because it makes them feel safe and feel like they can laugh and really enjoy themselves. So 50 people who are right up on the stage, that gig is going to be great. But then 50 people who are spread all the way to the back of a room in little clumps, it's going to be much harder to reach out to those people and get them laughing,
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be an interesting adjustment. I mean, a lot of foreign countries already have their scenes starting to return. So I may be jetting off there, I suppose, to do some gigs. That might be the fix.
Is that something? For a bit. I know you did New York and stuff. Do you do many gigs abroad?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of do. I mean, the last couple of years, I've done a couple of international tours every year. So I usually do Europe, Russia, and America is kind of what I do.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's really, really nice. America is really surprising because I do much, much better in the States than I do here. And when I go, I've got like a lovely tour manager over in the States who books me all these wonderful things. And every time he books them, I say, why have you booked this big venue? We're not going to fill this. And he says, well, they've just got no other entertainment, and a British person coming to their town is super exciting for them.
We did one gig in the States about 3 years ago, and it was, you get treated a different way, don't you?
You certainly do, yeah. My big joke is that you find out what it's like to be a beautiful woman if you're a guy with a British accent, because you just wander into places and go, excuse me, I was wondering if you could help me. And everyone in there goes, I sure hope I can. And it's really nice,
Yeah, it's lovely. I mean, I love playing. I'd love to go back out again. I mean, the only problem is obviously visas and stuff's a nightmare, isn't it? So
it is tough, yeah. It's a lot of, there's a lot of red tape involved and stuff, but it's really worthwhile. It's easier as a performer. I'll just turn my phone off, sorry, because of course I don't get any texts for a whole week, and then all of a sudden when I'm on the bloody,
of course,
texts all at once, as is always the case. But what was I saying? Yeah, it's easier if you're a person alone because you can do all your own driving. You can stay in very cheap accommodation or on people's floors. And it's much easier, but with bands it's a bit harder because you've got to be moving equipment.
It was very difficult, and the visa process was. Basically, we had to prove we were an artist of note, that they couldn't.
That's right. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, you can't just be any old person, can you?
So we had to sort of take in piles of press, and the first time we did it, they turned us down. Then the second time they did it, they approved us. But there's a lot of bands, that three of them will get approved and one won't. So Orange Goblin, who are a massive doom stoner band, aren't they? So
yeah, I really like those guys.
They're brilliant, but their drummer didn't get in on their last tour. Yeah, it's bonkers. So
that is bonkers, isn't it?
The whole system is. And God knows what's going on in America now, obviously. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm itching in many ways. I'm very keen to get back, but on the other hand, I'm quite upset at what's happening to, because it's a country that I love deeply. I always have such a wonderful time there. I know so many great people, and I always say, because Russia's another place I've been a lot and done gigs and stuff, and I always say to people, it's never the people, it's always the governments who make these countries look bad.
Yeah, totally.
Every young Russian I met, your 20 to 30-year-old Russians, they got all the same attitudes as anyone from the West. You know what I mean? And especially the people in the sort of arts scene. They're completely indistinguishable from us or Europeans. And then to see how their government treat people, you'd think it was a completely different country,
I would love to get to Russia. I'd love to do that, but it's
I do recommend it.
it's one of those things. Unless there's a festival's going to put us on, and we can book some dates around, that works. But it's just a fluke, you know what I mean? You have to be so lucky to get these things.
Oh, you really do. But the other, you know, that's the other thing about being a stand-up comedian that is so much easier. Once you're out in the country, it's very easy to find stuff where you can hop on. You know, especially in the bigger cities, you can find nights, so you can perform 3 or 4 times in a night at different venues when you're in town. Whereas obviously for bands with gear and getting, you know,
it's a big job.
If it's a big job, and if you're not the right sort of band for a certain night, it can be a nightmare. Yeah,
especially when you're a band that's, you know, of a very niche nature. As
exactly. Yes. Hello, we're an instrumental pop band. Can we play at your concert?
That's not going to happen. Yeah. So yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world. How did you get into doing comedy then, Sam?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I was a working musician for years and years and years. So I used to do an awful lot of music. I used to do a lot of playing on EPs and touring, all sorts of things. And I just found that my skill set was kind of becoming worth less and less and less money.
Yes.
And I've always been one of these weird people where, like, I'm so anti the real job that it's almost painful. So I kind of always, like, I'm always hustling. I've always described myself as like an artistic odd jobs man. That's kind of been my thing. I'd always say yes to an arts job to do. And as I saw, especially, like, I used to do like session drumming and I used to write music for the BBC. And both of those jobs started to get less and less. And especially from the BBC, I was actually offered a lot less money every time I did a job for them, you know, as they got more and more guys coming out of college or university saying, oh, I can do it for a third of the price or whatever. And I just wasn't serious enough to be a singer-songwriter. So I was just like, right, stand-up comedy it is. I can do it on my own. I've always fancied it, to be honest. I always thought, oh yeah, that would be something I'd like, you know, just mucking about for a living. That seems like a good job. And I just dived headfirst into it, and I treated it the same as I treated my music, in that I always, from the get-go, was just like, hey, I am a stand-up comedian, you know.
That's what you got to do.
I completely ignored all the advice of all the older people who said, oh, you got to do loads of 5-minute sets for ages and have a shit time and be awful for a long time. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'll just book my own shows, you know. And then people can come. And to be honest, I had much more chutzpah than talent when I was young, when I was new at stand-up. I've watched some of the videos of my first sort of year or so. I'm like, God, I was awful.
I think so much of it is performance is a confidence trick, isn't it? That
100%, yeah. And you are what you say you are, and I really believe that. And like, I think bands and stand-ups, they both make the same mistake, because as a stand-up, even when you do nice big gigs like I do, you're still occasionally going to do an open mic just to try some material out, or you're going to do a room that's a bit emptier or a bit colder. And there's too many people I know who will do a bad gig and then post online, oh, what a shit gig, and then a picture of them in an empty room. And I'm like, don't do that.
No,
because then everybody's seeing you doing badly. You know,
we've all had horrible gigs.
Oh, 100%.
I'm not going to put that on on our website. I mean,
exactly.
The
worst thing is even really high standard professional comedians just occasionally come out and completely suck in a room that just wasn't for them. And as I said, like, you should never ever show anybody that stuff. You shouldn't complain about that sort of thing.
It definitely happens to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. It does happen to everyone. And if you say to the world, I'm a shit open mic comedian, then they go, this person's a shit open mic comedian.
It's very much, I mean, I think, and one of the things I realised as we carried on doing it was the massive shows are easy. The little shows are hard. But the really big shows, the big shows are because everything's set up for you, and everyone's like, right, we're here to see an act.
Exactly, everyone's ready to go. Yeah,
and it's like
exactly right.
We've paid our money. We want to enjoy ourselves. But if you're playing in the corner of an open mic night and people are trying to have a pint and argue with their mate, that's a tough show. That's tough.
Yeah.
But we've done the sort of the big shows we've done. They're just so much easier because people want to have a nice time. And all you've got to do is provide the goods, like.
Yeah, I always say, why are the White Stripes famous? And it's like, it's because of they can have 50,000 people at a show. Like I've always said, Like, if the White Stripes were playing in the corner of a pub, no one would give a shit.
No.
I really think that.
No, yeah, I
And
agree completely. So
I think
much.
it's only exposure and
Yeah.
the idea that they're rock stars is what made it kind of come true, because she was an awful drummer. And I mean, I actually respect him a lot more now. I like a lot of the stuff he's done since then a lot more, but I never ever thought he was anything special. But
No.
because he's put on the pedestal and everyone says, oh, this is special, this is good, say it enough, people believe it. And it works on a small level and it works on a big level,
If you can manifest these sort of things by, like I say, you have to talk. I mean, Bowie's the classic example by, being he created that character, and he failed numerous times, and then finally created the masterpiece that he was. But by telling people he was a rock star, and he went to America and hired a big car. If you go to an award ceremony and turn up in a big car, you've won the award anyway, because people will see. You look like that guy, you know what I mean? So
that's exactly it. Yeah.
I
Turn
think
up in a nice suit and confidently walk in, and everyone just goes, "Yeah, he's supposed to be there."
Because one of the things, I mean, I feel really confident doing gigs, but that's because I've done hundreds of gigs. But I think, you can't, and I think audiences don't like it if you go in nervous. I think audiences want to be held by the hand and go, this person knows what they're doing. Brilliant. I haven't got to worry about this.
Yeah.
It's really awkward for an audience to deal with somebody who doesn't feel confident themselves. It's a difficult thing for them to deal with as well, because, so in terms of your musical output of late then, so how many EPs you done?
5 now. My idea was to do 4 EPs in 4 different styles during lockdown, because I had, I'd been writing kind of professional bits and pieces, but there were certain styles I just never got to do that I really rather like. And I thought, now's the time while I've got nothing else to do. So I did a black metal EP, death metal EP, sorry,
cool.
80s electro pop EP, a 60s psychedelic rock EP, and a country folk EP where I play a lot of banjo on it.
Genius. I think that's really cool. I think it's such a clever idea to do that.
Yeah, and what I then did is I really looked into each sort of style and learned a lot about production techniques for that specific thing, which was really, really interesting. And because I play all the instruments myself, I didn't have to wait on anyone else. And I always love playing in bands, and I love collaborating with people. But you get this weird thing sometimes where you're really feeling it, the other guy's not feeling it that day, or you've got a riff and you're like, where are the words? And he's like, I haven't got the words yet, and then it stumbles along. But with these, I did each one in 2 weeks, completely wrote, recorded, edited, produced, and released in 2 weeks. The last one I've just finished, because I've done a 5th now. I've done a follow up to the death metal one.
Cool. I love that when you sent me. It was awesome.
Oh yeah, cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it, man. I really think this new one that I've just finished, I'm like super duper proud of this. I'm like, if I'd have heard this as a teenager, I would really like it. It's a 20 odd minute concept piece about peasant uprising, basically. So
I think you found your target audience. I'm interested.
Yeah, so it's a death metal album that's 4 tracks. Each is about 5 minutes, and each is based on a different band or style to represent the different characters.
Which bands?
Well, the King there's a song by Morbid Angel called Where the Slime Live.
I know, I'm well aware of it.
Yeah, I've always kind of really liked the image of that. And I was like, okay, so the King in the first song is Where the Slime Live, and it's that vibe because he's horrible and he lives in a big castle and he's nasty. And the second one is like peasants planning the uprising. So I did that more like a Viking death metal style thing. So it's all like folk rock death metal basically. And then the third one, they're storming the castle, so that's Slayer. So just really fast, lots of fast bits and screaming. And then the fourth one is kind of set in the future when the people who've done the uprising are now the people in charge. And because that one's set in the future, that's got some synths in, and it's more of a modern sounding song maybe. So cool. Hopefully the music is kind of indicative of what it's supposed to be as well. And I've got a guy, the only thing I'm waiting on is the guy who's doing the album cover for me. And so, it's always that.
Was sort of death metal one of your earliest musical influences then?
Oh, big time. Yeah, I was just a huge fan of that stuff when I was younger.
Same.
And until fairly recently, I kind of had that relationship with it where it was like, I like it for its nostalgic reasons, but I'm not maybe getting into the new bands as much, and I'm not really following the scene. But then about 2 years ago, after not listening to it for ages, I kind of rediscovered it a little bit, you know, and I went through a bit of a phase again.
I
And
think
the only thing I can't really get is those guitar solos, those awesome guitar solos that those guys do, you know. So,
the Bills. I mean, my favorite death metal was Carcass, and those
oh
guitar
yeah,
solos. The guitar solos, Mike Hammett and Bill Steers solos on Necroticism were just
yeah.
incredible. So I mean, they're the gold star standard for metal leads for me. There's,
Oh, definitely, yeah.
there's Mike Hammett's second lead break on Incarnated Solvent Abuse is one of my favourites guitar solos ever. It's just, I mean, there's this.
That's how you know you're a proper musician, isn't it? Because you're not just like that solo. You're like the second guitar break in, in the second section of the song is my favourite.
There's this like descending arpeggio thing that Bill Steer and Mike Hammett does this harmonic minor thing, and it just it's
Yeah.
just and look, hairs on my arm like that, just thinking about it. but that was my, you know, I was a kid, you know, I used to go and see Carcass and Napalm and
Yeah.
well, I think that was a really exciting time for music. You know, the early days of death metal, the early '90s and stuff. I think there's lots of really good bands around there. I think it was, you know.
Oh God, yeah. I love that. I love that era especially because I like, weirdly, I like the two extremes of it. I either like the ones who are like super competent, super tight and brilliant, or the really sloppy ones. You know,
When I like Terrorizer. I think you remember Terrorizer, and they're kind of they're like extremely really grindy, but then they're going to these sort of groovy bits as well.
Yeah.
I love the drumming. I think the drumming's fantastic.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff out there, man. I mean, I like the first Deicide album. I really feel like the first two, they really feel just like they're not the tightest performed albums ever, but like I just love they just really hit the nail on the head, like tonally, you know, what they were going for, the look of the thing, the sound of the thing. I'm like, I love this. It's great. You know.
Yeah, they're an unusual band, but I think one of the other good things about that scene was, you know, the main sort of bands, Deicide and Team, Carcass, Morbid Angel, Napalm, they all have their own very individual sounds, and then there's people like sort of around the same sort of scene like Cathedral and Godflesh and lots of really interesting music around. You know, there wasn't necessarily straight death metal, but was affiliated to Earache and that underground scene, and I used to love going and seeing all those bands, and it's really interesting to see like the way like the guys from Napalm, you got Jesu, Justin Broderick's band, Bill Steers done loads of interesting melodic stuff. Cathedral, you know, turned into this sort of genius.
Oh yeah, it's
rock band.
really good. That
So
I think I was going to say, I just think it's fascinating how at the time in the early to mid 90s, they signed a couple of the bands to the big labels, didn't they? Because they were really going like, this is going to be the next big thing. It's going to be the next big thing. And it never really managed to be the next big thing, not like a grunge or metal but what is so nice about it is it's kind of retained its sort of outsider status. So even the stuff that's based on it, stuff like Slipknot and everything like that, that's probably the most mainstream version of it. There's still this element like, oh yeah, if you like this, it's fringe. Yeah. And then you get stuff like Metalocalypse, which I just thought was the best television show ever.
Yeah.
And I just love that because that is a joke. Most of that is jokes for a very small and specific audience. You know, like the place I go to eat is called Demu Burger. You know? and that is a joke just for people like me. And I'm like, I freaking love this. And I've always loved that groupist sort of thing, because that was, for me, I was a horrible nerdy child with not many friends and an odd life. And then I found heavy metal and the concerts, and I was like, oh, here's where all the other me's are. This is where we all live, you know.
Yeah, very much so. I think those sort of heavy metal was, I mean, I remember watching, you know, the Arena heavy metal documentary and discovering Iron Maiden and all those bands. And I discovered most of my friends, the guys I'm still in the Fierce and the Dead with, we were all metal kids together, you know, and then we got into, you know, American hardcore, and then Psychedelia, Jellyfish, King's X, and just those. We went through that journey through music together, and it was just great. And I'm just really glad that I found metal because it looks a little bit scary, but actually everybody's lovely, aren't they?
Oh yeah, I always say that to people all the time. I'm like, the nicest musicians working are mostly death metal guys. They're the only guys where there's no horrible stories about them being horrendous human beings,
I interviewed Bill Steer for a magazine, and
cool.
he was talking about Gentleman's Pistols, the band he started a few years back, and I didn't let on I was a massive fan. I was just I was just chatting to, and what I really wanted to say is, how did you get that guitar tone on Incarnated Sovereign Abuse? But he obviously would have thought I was just a random loon, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
I didn't let the mask slip right until the end. It's like, I just want to say thank you so much for your music. It means so much to me. And he was lovely though. He was such a sweet dude, and he didn't want to talk about metal really. He just wanted to talk about the Sweet. He was really into the Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet B-sides. He loved glam rock. So who knows?
Well, I often find that as well. All my mates are in death metal bands. They don't actually listen to loads and loads of death metal. Weirdly, it's kind of an odd thing. They play it all the time, but then their listening tastes are very, very different indeed for the large part.
I was talking to John Mitchell he plays like Frost and It Bites and all these sort of prog bands. And we were both saying we don't listen to prog at all. To be honest, that's not really our thing. You know what I mean? But it's not that I don't like it. I just you don't listen to it at home. You know what I mean? Because it's
I have a thing. I just think like there's a lot of great new prog bands, but for every one great new prog band, there's what I like to call like that awful. I call it like ploddy prog, where all the songs are really, really long. And it's just like the bits of Marillion that aren't interesting, but like for a whole song, and it goes on for 20 minutes, and it just sounds like a Christian rock song. I just think
it's the Christian rock element that freaks me out. I've never come across, because I wasn't involved with the prog scene until about 10 years ago, and I just sort of wandered into it because I was I was just playing in metal bands, indie bands, that sort of thing, and I remember coming across it. Some of it was really good. And then some of it just sounds like Christian rock. Some of it's got a whiff of Cliff about it.
Really, really does. And the thing is, I think the biggest trap that so many prog bands fall into is they go, right, it's prog, it has to be long.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many times I'll listen to a piece and I think if you'd have cut 3 minutes out of this and it was 7 minutes instead of 10 minutes, this would be much better. There's a whole bit in the middle of this which is rubbish. And like...
Yeah, not right.
There are long pieces that are brilliant. There are long pieces that are absolutely brilliant and that I listen to all the way through. Like, I love Supper's Ready by Genesis. I love 2112. All the real classics. There's a new band called Wobbler, actually.
I've heard that. Yeah, they're very good.
I was very, very impressed with them because that's all quite old-fashioned tones, but it's still very intricate, interesting, very nicely arranged. And those guys really did it for me. I was like, this is great.
There's a lot of good new bands. I mean, it's a really weird time because it's easy to make a prog record now because basically you can get those. I mean, as they say, just get all those sounds and off you go. Get your Mellotron, get your However, it's still hard to make a good prog album. It's still hard to make...
It totally is, because the good stuff, especially something like 2112, the beauty of that is every riff on that would be a great song on its own. And I think that's what so many of the prog guys forget. They go like, even though it's got to be, even though there's got to be widdly bits, having something catchy in it is still important if you want people to come back and listen to it more than once,
I saw Rush live. I got a bit emotional watching them, actually.
Oh, mate, you and me both. I adore Rush. Have you seen just today, there's a new video come out, and it's Claudio Sanchez from Coheed and Cambria, Les Claypool from Primus,
I saw it,
Danny Carey from Tool, and the guitarist from Mastodon playing Anthem by Rush. And it is probably the best bit of music that's ever been recorded. I don't think anyone's ever going to do better than that.
I heard it this afternoon. I was very impressed That's
It's
a
like
tough
my
tune.
top 4 bands in my top 5 bands playing a song by the 5th band. You know, it's like crazy, crazy good. And I love
And
it.
that's not easy stuff to play either, is it? It's just,
God no.
I
And
mean,
like I've never seen, because I'm a huge Coheed and Cambria fan, and I've never, and with them as well, I know that Claudio Sanchez got really sick of everyone saying, "Oh, he sounds like the singer from Rush." He used to get it all the time.
yeah.
So this is the first time in his 30-year career as a musician, or however bloody long it is now, that he's actually gone, "Yeah, I'll just sing a Rush song," and he's freaking nailed it.
He
And
was
I'm like,
brilliant, absolutely
he is
brilliant.
so good. And I'm like, I just want these guys to be a band now.
Yes, that would be cool.
You know, you play that game where it's like, what is your dream band? It's like they recorded a song this week.
Amazing. No, I was hugely impressed, and they even got the guitar sound right with the little phasery guitar bit on it.
Nailed it.
Absolutely nailed it, and just like,
And
wow.
I thought, especially adding the harmony to the lead parts and stuff was just so, because then it sounded like Mastodon, but it's a Rush riff, and I was like, man, this is beautiful.
No, I love the guitar sound. I thought it was brilliant. Yeah, I was very, very impressed. I listened to it twice actually. I was
Yeah,
blown
well, I've had it on all afternoon. I've sent it to everyone I've ever met. I'm like, hey, look at this, it's the best.
No, it was really cool. So after the metal stuff, then was it sort of you got into the sort of psych stuff and all that sort of thing later on?
I just adore psych stuff. I'm a big vinyl collector, so I've got a load of late '60s, early '70s psychedelic stuff on vinyl.
You like the Zombies, because we're listening to
I
your.
love the Zombies.
You hear
Huge
a bit
fan
of
of the
that,
Zombies. Yeah, I like all of that era stuff. Just my thing with music is always, I say to people, if it took a bit of time and effort to make, I'm probably going to like it. That's usually the rule. And I think with that experimental psych, like the crossover psych era where the prog bands were kind of coming up and the psych was still there, I just love. It's the same thing I was saying about prog earlier. I love that it's like prog but condensed in many ways.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
Odyssey
here's all
and
the
Oracle.
things I like about the early prog bands in songs that are 4 minutes long.
I think there's a case for Odyssey and Oracle being one of those like
If they hadn't have split up, that would have been the big deal. And I adore that album. I think that is so good. I genuinely do. And it's, you know, people talk about Sergeant Pepper, and to a lesser extent, something like Days of Future Past, the
Moody Blues,
Moody Blues one. And I think Odyssey and Oracle is right up there with them. I think it's so good, and it deserves to be recognized as a really amazing piece of work from that era.
Rose for Emily is there's. I mean, I think that's as good as Eleanor Rigby, and because it's heartbreakingly sad, but the chord progression is just so beautiful, and the word. I mean, a lot of the time, a lot of psych stuff, the words can be a bit cringy, but one of the good things about that album is the words are really good. Everything's
definitely. Well, the opening song, which is his wife who's been in prison and is going to pick her up. I just love that. I think that's really nice.
I'm going to listen to that when we finish.
Yeah. And this will be our year. That one, another absolutely beautiful love song. You know, so nice.
There's a sort of autumnal sadness about it though, as well. And it's like they sing quite. It's quite, you know, it's very major key, and so there's all there's sort of terrible sadness about it. I don't know quite what it is, but there's this thing where it's quite. It's autumnal is probably the thing, and then they split up as soon as they finished recording it, didn't they? And then
it is a real shame, because they should have been huge. They should have been one of the big bands at the time, but they just couldn't hold it together, could they? Unfortunately, I know the past couple of years they've been touring and reproducing the entire album live with most of the original lineup, and it's apparently brilliant. It's apparently very, very good.
I've seen them a couple of times. I saw them, but I've never seen them do the whole album. I saw them do like a greatest hits set twice, and Blunstone's still got the voice. He's still got, there's something, you know, there's just something about his voice that's, it's a bit like a Nick Drake sort of thing, where there's a real haunting sort of quality, and very hard to get those sort of vocals, isn't it?
It really is, and he sounds young. I kind of always envision like a 14-year-old like dreaming what his future could be, you know, and it's got that very like whimsical, very soft, you know, emotional, and quite like quite hopeful, which is quite odd in rock music. You know, it's not a thing.
There's not. I can't think of many albums that have got a similar tone.
definitely not. I think it's a beautiful piece of work. The other thing I like from around there, which feels similar, but on the kind of other end of the spectrum, is the Incredible String Band. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah.
And like that stuff, also to me, I love that because it's very sloppily recorded because they were very high when they did it. But it's so like, it's like the absolute embodiment of what a mid to late 60s hippie was thinking and talking about.
Yeah.
What is it? What's it? I put the stones in the water to see what they would do. The stones became more watery and the water became stony too. I love it. Like,
Genius.
it's just this beautiful psychedelic talking about how his paint box is everybody that he knows and all the different colors represent his friends. I'm just like, it's like, I just love it. I'm like, yes, I really, really like this. It sounds like two teenage stoners having a conversation on a park bench, and they've made it into music.
Genius. No, there's a magic to that stuff, isn't there? Well, Sam, also you've been doing a bit on TikTok, haven't you?
I started to get into TikTok. Yeah, it's actually my girlfriend. She's very wise and she works in media. And I've always said, I hate TikTok. And she said, Sam, no one cares about your integrity except you. Just do it and stop being silly about it. And to be fair, I do it now, and I use it as an excuse to write a minute's worth of joke a day. And I don't really care how much gets picked up, but it is kind of keeping my brain ticking over. And occasionally I'll hit on something where I go, hey, that's quite nice. But I absolutely hate the format, to be honest. I hate the app.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I mean, I can't get it. I can't see how it'd work for me. I mean, I've messed about with it. I just, for what I do, it's not going to work, is it?
I would say though, for people, if you are good at doing guitar covers, there are some people who get some really good coverage doing, just a guitar solo from a song or something like that, because you've only got a minute. So
well, you see, I've seen, I don't know, it's quite difficult because I could do some flash guitar playing, but there's how many people could? That's a million people could do that. You know what I mean? So
it's a difficult thing. Any of these modern things, it's very hard because they sort of instinctively go against how I feel about art.
Same. Because I mean, I was talking to John Mitchell today. It bites and that. I was talking to him, and he said, and we were talking about how you sell music in the current sort of climate. And I think it's finding things that you don't cringe when you do, right? So I'm happy to have a Fierce and Good YouTube channel and talk to people that I like talking to. I'm fine with that. All I do is press play on Zoom, whack that on the channel. I'm not selling anything. I'm just talking to people and finding out interesting stuff. That's fine with me. But if I was to go on there and try and sell something or try and check out my band, it makes me embarrassed. And it's
I know exactly what you mean. Yes.
So I'm trying to find ways to create things that I like creating. So having this conversation with you and hearing about you, that's interesting to me, and I'm fine with that. And I've been doing quite a few of these where I've been building up the content to, and that's fine. And I'm fine to put songs on there, and I'm fine to put little demos of guitar pedals where I make funny noises. But I can't be a vlogger. I can't do any of that stuff.
No, I do know what you mean. I find it very difficult because I think the biggest thing for me is that stuff is there forever now.
Yeah.
And I feel like the thing I like about discovering new people, either bands or comedians or actors or whatever, is that usually you can then go back and look at a large collection of stuff. So with podcasts, if I find a new podcast, I love to find out that there's 500 episodes previously that I can go back and listen to. And I want, when people discover what I'm doing, I don't want them to go like, oh, here's a load of stuff that Sam's done. Oh, this is all shit. Do you know what I mean?
But the nature of YouTube is that if you look at all these successful YouTubers, you look back at their catalogue of YouTube and the early stuff they do is awful. Every single person, or they've covered it up. But you go back through like video, and a lot of them have been doing videos for like 8 years.
Yeah.
And the early stuff always completely different style of content. But I don't know how you do that thing where you talk to a camera without anyone to bounce off. It's that thing of not having an audience and not. It's a different.
It is odd, and I'm not a big fan of like quote unquote like unskilled content.
Yeah.
I like a comedian who's a comedian who can write a couple of jokes. I don't like a guy who slaps someone in the face and says it's a prank.
Yeah.
I don't like a guy who will, I don't know. He's learned three chords on his guitar, and then he's like, "Look, I can play this." And because he's like a handsome young chap, everyone's like, "Wow, you're amazing." You know, this sort of thing. I find a bit frustrating, but you know, it's just because I hold the things that I like in very, very high regard, and I forget that other people just like things. Do you know what I mean? Other people are perfectly happy to see something silly in an afternoon and then never think about it again.
Yeah, you see, I'll cringe about stuff for years and worry about whether that's appropriate or, you know. But I think it's a weird time because I think the people who are doing really well in some areas are people who can just do something and throw it out there without any sort of, which is interesting because there are a lot of people who are hitting that point now where they've been doing that for years. And they've made lots of terrible, hideous mistakes early on in their careers, and people are going back and watching. And you look, so I can't remember the name. There's always YouTube drama stuff, but people have put stuff in videos that are basically socially acceptable. It's right, and they, you know, no one noticed it when they first started putting stuff up because they didn't have an audience. But they go back and you go back over that content. I mean, so I think one of the things we're getting good at YouTube is to do lots of YouTube. But I don't feel I'm the sort of person who could do that. You know, that's not for me. You know, it's just a different game.
I think it's all about finding what's the hardest part is it's the balance of doing things you want to do that you think are good and also making sure that people can see that thing. That is the hard thing. And quite often the YouTube stuff, the Facebook stuff, these are kind of necessary evils that might kind of grow the brand, if it were, you know. I mean, I did some work for this Russian YouTube conglomerate where I was writing like comedy music videos. I
saw that. You got 1 million views, didn't it?
I got, like that's nearly at 2 million, I think, that particular one. Yeah. And like, amazing. Yeah. And the others, there's some things I did for them voice acting bits. I hope no one ever knows that I did it because it's so like they've got a lot of views on some of the voice acting ones I did, but I am just not proud of it.
Anything that reaches that, I mean, you know, I can't imagine what it's like to reach that sort of audience. I mean, the only thing is the more people you reach, the more less polite feedback you get, I suppose.
God, yeah, 100%. And the thing I find so funny is because that stuff in particular, it was very simple, very broad material. It was kind of spoof pop songs.
It's well done.
Little jokes in. And the amount of people who would just completely miss whatever joke it was, or then type a correction as if like, actually, I think you'll find.
Actually,
it's like, it's a joke. There was one, we did a song about Instagram and how people use Instagram to pretend to be what they're not. And this guy, the whole joke is everything he does gets progressively stupid. So it starts off just little things like changing his teeth. And then by the end, he's on Mars dancing with a Martian, you know, and every verse, the things he was pretending to do got more and more ridiculous. And one of them was like, oh, I'm playing football with the famous athlete, Michael Jordan. And the joke, of course, is that Jordan is a basketball player. We made a silly photo where he'd done a silly mock-up of like playing football with Jordan. And the amount of people who then put like, I think you'll find that Michael Jordan plays basketball. What is wrong with you? And I'm like, that's the joke. And it wasn't like 3 people. It was like 500 people.
It's properly odd. I think some of the things I've seen in it's very odd. Sam, thank you so much. It's been so lovely talking to you.
Absolute pleasure, mate.
Where can people find out more about you?
Well, I'm Sam Rhodes professionally and online. Facebook is my main portal. So the Sam Rhodes Comedy Explosion is where it's all at. And everything I make for myself is kind of under the Sam Rhodes Comedy Explosion banner. So I've got some YouTube stuff. I'll repost the links to those ones that weren't Comedy Explosion videos that I made if you'd like as well.
I'll put them in the video description if that's all right.
I'll put a few links over. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sam. Hugely appreciate it, sir.
Great to see you, buddy. Yeah. Hopefully once we can all move about, we can go out for a proper drink.
That'd be lovely. Right, I'm going to stop recording now.